A teenager's body found dumped in the woods.
He sees a Rubbermaid bin. He lifts the lid and actually realizes that he is looking at a dead body. Cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation. He was thrown out like trash.
When I got that phone call, I was enraged.
His family explains he was supposed to be on a college admissions trip.
He was applying to university for art.
He was an artistic, intelligent, and beautiful soul.
But the investigation reveals it was all a lie.
I emailed the art school, but nobody emailed me back.
She had created and fabricated this entire story.
And when a surprising eyewitness steps forward, she points detectives to members of the victim's own family.
She took the time to learn what made him happy, and she used that as a way to kill him.
You say I murdered somebody. That's correct.
This is one of the saddest and most disturbing cases that I've ever worked.
She's just pure evil.
Virginia, a man is taking a break from work when he comes across a strange object.
As he's taking his smoke break and walking through the woods, he sees a Rubbermaid bin. As he gets closer, he sees what he believes to be a shoe sticking out of the bin.
Curiosity, of course, strikes him, and he goes over.
Henrica 911, what's the address of the emergency?
Yes, I found a dead body over in the woods. I just reported it. I don't know what to do.
Okay. I've got the police car. Were they still breathing at all?
No, they're in a tote, like in a tote.
They start taking photographs. What we see when we open the lid of the box is a young black male that the only way I can describe it is kind of like put in like an accordion. Knees tucked to the chest.
Detectives notice powder covering the body.
It was determined that it was lime, which will stop decay of human flesh. Detectives had a theory that lime was put in the box with the body so that whenever this individual was found, if ever, it would be very hard to determine the timing of the death and maybe how they died. Homicide detectives lay a white sheet down on the grass and roll the bin over so that they can remove the body. And it's at that point when they discover that actually behind the back of the individual, the wrists have been bound with a purple athletic type tape.
No cutting of the skin, no bruising of the body, nothing that would suggest there had been any trauma inflicted on this individual.
When they search the police database for missing persons, investigators find a possible match.
It was determined that there was a missing persons report for an individual that had been filed several weeks earlier by the Sisters of Martre Coles. They pulled up his DMV photograph in the system, and they were able to determine that those two photographs were a match, and that we were dealing with the body of Martre Coles. This is a 19-year-old boy that no one has seen or heard from in weeks. No one was notified, including his family. And that was a strategic decision that was made by law enforcement because they felt like they were able to have the upper hand and potentially gain more information if everybody still thought Martre was just a missing person. There were a lot of questions that detectives had about who could have done this, when this death occurred and why this would have happened.
Martre Coles was born on October 22, 1997, the youngest of 8 children raised by Maurice and Karina Coles.
As a kid, Martre was
Martre was funny, sensitive, and he was very smart.
From an early age, he exhibited a passion for art.
my mom's father actually introduced Martre into drawing. I feel like drawing brought Martre was his peace.
He wanted to go to school for video games, like drawing for video games and stuff.
Tragedy changed Martre's plans for the future when his mother suddenly died of a heart attack in 2014.
My mom's passing.
Move on without my mom.
Martre's siblings, being in their 20s, had already moved out of the home, which left him with only his grieving father Maurice for support.
They both were distraught. They both were dealing with their own personal feelings behind the death. So my dad couldn't tend to Martre mourning when he was mourning that he lost his wife.
One of Maurice's friends and co-workers, Denise Gay, saw what was happening and offered to help. She was a single mother raising 5 children of her own.
My mother is like the typical, like what most people end up seeing as the mother bear.
Denise was kind of Maurice's shoulder to cry on when his wife died.
Denise treated Martre like a son. And as she spent more time at the house, her friendship with Maurice blossomed into romance.
I was feeling like Maurice is going to end up being like the last relationship that she would have for a significant amount of time because they both seem like very happy.
Before long, Maurice invited Denise and her youngest daughter to move in with them.
Even though Martre's father was not married to Denise, they were living in somewhat of a step-family situation.
I didn't care to get to know her. I don't know what type of woman would move into a dead woman's home within a month. She didn't rub me the right way when I met her. My father, he was a Rolling Stone. That's been presented to me all of my life, so that wasn't really shocking.
Martre, he was still mourning his mother, but after a while, maybe like a couple months or so, he did start warming up to my mother because she was explaining to us like, I'm not here to replace your mother, but I am a person who is going to be here for you.
By 2017, Martre seemed to be recovering from his grief. He'd even started dating.
Martre had a unique relationship with his girlfriend. They had met in high school, and they actually communicated almost 24 hours a day.
He was also bonding with Denise's children.
We both did want to work in like the game industry, him on the art side, me on the more like coding programming side of it.
Just him like reaching out to the counselor to get a tour. Martre was very excited about going to Full Sail and that they contacted him and that they were in a different state. He was excited about possibly starting something new.
But Martre never got the chance to fulfill his dreams. Instead, he's become the victim of an unthinkable homicide. And Virginia police are beginning their investigation.
Martre Coles' body was taken to the office of the medical examiner for an autopsy.
The cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation.
There are 2 substances found in the bloodstream of this individual. that being trazodone and traces of GHB. GHB, of course, being the street name for what we call the date rape drug. Trazodone is used often for people who are having trouble sleeping.
Potentially what happened was this person was drugged, passed out, and maybe even put in the box in that particular accordion position while still alive and suffocated inside of the box.
The just callousness of the actions. Why did a 19-year-old have to die like this?
Coming up, investigators find a potential eyewitness.
You all right? All good? You got in trouble, right?
As she's in her room watching TV, she hears a scream coming from the room next door.
By his sisters, Michelle and Marquisha Coles. Using the information provided by the sisters in their report, homicide investigators are able to start piecing together the events of the day Martre vanished.
The last time I saw Martre, we had a birthday get-together for my sister. And I took him back home so he could get ready to go and visit the school.
He was going to be going on a trip out of town to Full Sail University in Florida, where he was hoping to be admitted as an art student.
According to the report, Martre needed to put the finishing touches on an art project for his application before leaving for Florida.
He was to take it to school with him, and it was a mask of his face.
The sisters wished him luck and went home to rest.
I went to sleep. I woke up to about 80 missed calls.
She had numerous calls missed from Martre's girlfriend. She is very concerned that something has happened to him.
Martre was not responding to her messages.
Michelle reached out to her sister Marquisha, and they head over there to the residence.
When the sisters returned to the house just a few hours after dropping off their brother, Denise told them Martre had already left. She told them while packing, Martre realized he left his wallet at Michelle's house.
The last time she saw him, he was walking out of the house saying he was going to walk to Michelle's to get his wallet.
But Martre never showed up.
We kind of rode around the neighborhood just to see if we saw him walking up the street, and there was no sign of him. We went to go and file a police report the next morning.
They document the report and put it into the system, but unfortunately, because he is legally an adult at the time, they're not going to put out a notice for people to look for him.
Before they can interview Martre's sisters, investigators make an alarming connection.
Another member of the police department came to them and said, "Hey, this is triggering a memory of a report from not even a week ago."
2 weeks after Martre had gone missing, a security alarm had gone off at the Coles house.
2 Henrico police officers had responded, and when they got there late at night, the 2 people that were at the home were LaToya Gay, which is Denise's oldest daughter, and then her younger sister, Denise's youngest daughter.
When the officers asked LaToya what happened, she said it was her younger sister acting out.
The 12-year-old gets mad at her older sister, and she actually activates an alarm, and law enforcement responds. Henrico police have body-worn cameras, so we're able to watch this interaction of what unfolds.
You all right? All good? You got in trouble, right?
You gotta explain to her that everything she does has a consequence.
Yeah, I think we've had that talk before.
So police had been out to this house before.
The youngest daughter has been getting in trouble lately. Was the reason why the one police officer had that familiarity with the young lady.
They determined that there was really nothing wrong other than two sisters that were having a dispute.
Before the officers left, the youngest daughter asked to speak with the officer she recognized. Once they were in private, she told him a disturbing story.
What'd she say? Tell me this one.
The 12-year-old says it happened on the morning of March 12th. As she's in her room watching TV, she hears a scream coming from the room next door. So she got up, she goes into the hallway, gets to the door of Martre's bedroom, and looks in.
She had seen her mother and her sister pin him to the ground, one at his feet and one on his chest.
She describes something that looked kind of white on his face, but then catches eyes with her mother, who gives her the hand gesture to move on and go away. She went back to her room, and the next thing she recalls is hearing a noise, and she peeks open from her bedroom door to see her sister pushing a plastic bin down the hallway.
Are you being truthful, or are you making this up because you're mad?
At the time, officers didn't know what to make of the story, so they called her mother, Denise.
She's accusing LaToya, a sister she had just gotten in a fight with, so it sounds like trying to get back at her sister. Denise pretty much confirms she thinks that's what it is.
Make up a lot of stuff trying to get out of trouble, but you can't get out of trouble.
At the time, the officers chalked it up to an overactive imagination. They file a report, but don't investigate further. But now, detectives wonder if it was more than that.
She mentions Martre's body being put in a bin and taken away from the house. And when they realize how specific that description is and how closely it matches the way that Martre's body was found, they then become very concerned that it is possible this little girl was telling the truth. Immediately, LaToya and Denise are now suspects.
April 3rd, 2017. It's been 1 day since the body of 19-year-old Martre Coles was found dumped in the Virginia woods. Now armed with body cam footage of Denise Gay's daughter describing Martre's death, detectives proceed with caution. They ask Martre's older sisters to come in for an interview without informing them they've found his body.
The investigators know that something isn't quite right with Denise Gay. So there is a decision made that it was not going to be shared with the family at that time, that a body was found on April 2nd.
They ended up calling us down to the precinct for further questions on the relationship between Denise and Martre.
According to the sisters, Martre and Denise got along well enough in the beginning.
Martre told me that his relationship with Denise was pretty good, that she would talk to him, help him with like homework and things like that, help him with his art.
His bigger problems were really with Denise's daughter. She was a very troubled young girl. She would pick fights with people.
She had been, taking his stuff and destroying his things and, stuff like that.
Okay.
She was drawing stuff on the floors and trying to make it seem like as if Trey was drawing it. Just a lot of weird things started happening in the home.
Whenever Maurice would discover something had happened, Denise would say that the problems were Martre's fault to cover for her daughter.
The sisters reveal the issues between Martre and Denise's 12-year-old daughter only got worse.
They got into physical fights where they would push each other and yell and scream.
She was stabbing him and stuff.
She picked up some scissors and allegedly stabbed Martre in the head. Denise hid that from Maurice.
I asked Martre, have you told my mom? Have you told Maurice that all these things are happening? He's like, yeah, I did. And they say they're going to handle it. I'm just going to stay in my room and keep to myself.
According to his sisters, Martre began to suspect Denise was doing more than just hiding her daughter's behavior. She was encouraging it.
Martre expressed to me that he felt like Denise was trying to create a wedge between him and my father.
I think Denise wanted Martre gone because that was something of my mother's left in the home, and she was very jealous of my mom.
And what was his relationship with your dad like?
Iffy. He felt like my dad didn't like him. He felt like my dad didn't want him there.
Marquisha and Michelle say it was one of the reasons why Martre was looking forward to college.
He was excited about possibly starting something new, getting away from everything that was going on.
But in the weeks since his disappearance, they discovered something strange.
I emailed the art school, but nobody emailed me back.
His girlfriend knew that he had been communicating with Full Sail University, and they shared email information. She logged into his emails and looked through them.
She said that he was having a conversation with someone named Sheila Crenshaw.
Martre's girlfriend did some digging of her own and said, wait a second, this email is written pretty poorly, and then it's written and sent from a Gmail address. No legit university is going to have a Gmail address.
When the detectives reach out to Full Sail University, they find out that there is no one by the name of Sheila Crenshaw.
Someone had come up with Sheila's name and was trying to trick Martre into thinking that this woman was talking to him from the administration office at Full Sail University.
Coming up, a mysterious figure returns to the scene of the crime.
There are some still shot frames of an SUV and someone wearing a hoodie.
And investigators close in on their killers.
What happened? You killed him in your house. The last time you saw him, he was in a storage bin.
Just 24 hours into the hunt for 19-year-old Martre Coles' killer, investigators have a possible eyewitness to his death, and now evidence that someone tricked him into going on a college tour.
Someone went through a lot of trouble in this ruse to get Martre to believe he had been accepted at Full Sail University.
A search warrant is obtained and is executed on April 3rd at the residence. At that time, nobody is actually in the house. We are going to want to see if we can find anything in the bedroom itself that might help identify what these two women were doing to Martre.
detectives find nothing to support the idea that Martre left for his college visit.
Everything that he owned appeared to still be present in that room. His computer, his backpack.
But there is also nothing to support Denise's daughter's story about witnessing a crime.
During the search warrant, other things that were taken for evidence included laptops that belonged to Denise Gay and Martre's own laptop. Ultimately, they are turned over to the FBI for a full analysis of the data.
As the search continues, Denise's older daughter, LaToya, shows up at the house.
It's very apparent that she's uncomfortable and she's agitated, and she actually walks outside and sits down in her car and has a phone conversation that's fairly lengthy.
The next thing that is very interesting is that she actually leaves the residence before the search is completed.
Because of her demeanor, detectives ask other officers to actually follow her to see where she goes.
Officers follow LaToya to a familiar location.
LaToya led them right to where Martre's body was found. Investigators hadn't released any information to the family about the body. The only one that could possibly know where that body was located was the killer.
What we believe she was doing at that time was trying to see if there was any police activity that had the body been found.
Obviously, they immediately realized that the story provided by the youngest daughter is highly likely to be accurate. Another officer indicates that he actually has a motion-activated hunting camera, and they decide that it would be interesting to see if anybody else returns to that site.
And it was placed on a tree that would capture both the location of where the box was found as well as the bit of road.
5 days later, the camera captures grainy images of someone entering the dump site.
During the later part of April 7th, there are some still shot frames of what first looks like a SUV that is parked right there at the opening of the wooded area. Then we have another silhouette image that the best that can be described is someone who appears to be wearing a hoodie. There's no other defining aspects to this silhouette, nothing to suggest if it's a man or a woman.
Although detectives cannot identify the figure, they do notice something about the vehicle.
It was a dark SUV with flashy rims.
Martre's father, Maurice Coles, owns a large black SUV, and his vehicle actually had some pretty unique rims.
If we were making a conclusion that that was Maurice's car, we had to ask ourselves, did Maurice Coles have something to do with the death of his son, Martre?
The list of potential conspirators in Martre Coles' murder has now grown to include his father, Maurice.
Maurice's black SUV was driven by himself and Denise. Nobody else had access to use that vehicle. The detectives decide that they need to verify the whereabouts of Denise and Maurice at the time that those photographs were taken.
Both Maurice and Denise work at a processing plant in Smithfield, Virginia, about an hour and a half southeast of Richmond. so police checked their work schedules around the time the SUV was spotted at the dump site.
By using the cameras of the parking lot, but more importantly, the electronic time card, we were confident that Maurice Coles was in Smithfield during the evening hours of April 7th. That was not him in the image.
The evidence might rule out Maurice, but it further incriminates Denise. Records indicate she left work early on April 7th.
Denise is actually on security footage leaving the building and getting into the black SUV.
We were able to use the technology for the GPS location to track Denise's phone.
The cell phone data shows that Denise leaves Smithfield and comes back north, and it actually traces her going right past the location where Martre's body had been found.
Since only the killer could know the location of Martre's body, investigators can now tie Denise to the murder.
The evidence also confirmed that the 12-year-old girl is telling the truth. Her story was legit, and the implications of Denise and LaToya being involved were true.
On April 10th, Denise is brought in for questioning.
Okay, and I don't think that it's a surprise why you're here. Right?
You're saying I murdered somebody.
That's correct. You know why you're here.
No. What happened?
You killed him in your house. The last time you saw him, he was in a storage bin.
She just says, I don't know what you're talking about, and will not admit to anything.
Following the interview, detectives place Denise under arrest. Their next target is LaToya.
What we learned was that LaToya Gay had actually left the Commonwealth, and we find her in South Carolina with some family members.
You can't run away from it anymore, okay? There's a murder warrant for you.
For me? Why is it for me?
And it almost comes across as she's not surprised that they're arresting someone for murder, but she's surprised that they're arresting her for murder.
The initial idea was that we would maybe see if LaToya would cooperate and testify against her mother, but it was very clear that she was not going to be cooperating.
Now that police have their suspects in custody, they're able to notify Martre's sisters of his death.
I was enraged. When I got that phone call, everything just was checked off of how I felt about Denise from the beginning. I knew she was pure evil when I met her.
It was very difficult for them to know that we had known for many days before they did that their brother was dead. But they ultimately understood the decision. Once we've arrested LaToya and Denise, we still don't really understand why this crime has occurred. We keep doing further investigation and did criminal background checks on both of them.
That check reveals Denise has an extensive criminal record.
And what was interesting is that a lot of her criminal history related to fraudulent behavior and lies and deceit.
The FBI's analysis of Denise's laptop reveals her latest fraud.
Investigators found the email account of Sheila Crenshaw on Denise's computer.
Denise Gay was in fact this Sheila Crenshaw.
She had created and fabricated this entire Full Sail University story so that she could explain why later he would be absent and no one could find him.
We are also learning about some of the searches that were done on Denise's computer regarding Lyme, GHB, suffocation, and why would someone be asking for those types of questions if they didn't play a role in some particular actions.
Despite these discoveries, the case against Denise remains largely circumstantial. With a 12-year-old as their only eyewitness, prosecutors hope it will be enough to secure a conviction.
What was the motive for why these two grown women would harm this young man in the way that they did?
On December 8th, 2017, Denise and LaToya Gay stand trial for the murder of Martre Coles.
Our best theory of a motive relates to Denise's relationship with Maurice. Maurice lost his wife, who he dearly loved.
Denise looked at Martre as being the last thing that was reminding Maurice of what he had had before.
Denise snapped because jealousy got the best of her.
Prosecutors say the evidence shows Denise plotted for weeks to kill Martre, and she manipulated LaToya into helping her.
Denise saw her children as accessories to her criminal behavior.
Denise's youngest daughter is the state's star witness.
We believe that she drugged him, and once he became somewhat woozy, LaToya comes into the room to assist her in holding him down. The evidence from the youngest daughter is that Denise is actually on his chest. We don't know if he suffocated from the weight or if they were just able to take control of him. He was thrown out like trash. He was put in a Rubbermaid bin and tossed in the woods.
The defense attempts to undermine the young girl's testimony.
The defense wanted the jury to believe that this troubled 12-year-old is actually the killer.
Not only was Denise Gay going to not accept any responsibility, but that worse, she would try to pin this case on her 12-year-old daughter.
When the jury delivers its verdict, it comes as a shock to everyone in the courtroom.
They convicted both Denise and LaToya with conspiracy, but they didn't actually convict them on first-degree murder. The jury was hung, which to this day I still don't understand.
Prosecutors immediately prepare for a retrial, and a new witness comes forward.
Within a couple of days, Maurice Coles calls detectives.
Seeing the actual evidence in front of him made him believe what he had never wanted to believe before, that a woman that he had brought into his home and he thought cared for him and his family had actually killed his son.
Maurice was cleaning the house out, and he had found Denise's purse in this closet. In the purse was her wallet and her cell phone. In the wallet, we found the actual receipt of the purchase of a shovel.
And once we had her physical phone, we had the actual text messages that she and LaToya had been exchanging.
Denise was communicating with her daughter, LaToya, that she could not find the body on April 7th. That gave us clear and convincing evidence that that was in fact Denise Gay. in that image of the game camera.
The new evidence makes the outcome of the second trial less uncertain.
Ultimately, both women wound up being convicted of first-degree murder.
Denise Gay was given a life plus 10 years sentence. LaToya Gay is going to be serving a 30-year sentence.
I don't think that a mother with any type of compassion for her children would put her daughters in that type of predicament.
Denise is just pure evil.
This case is one of the saddest and most disturbing cases that I've ever worked. She took the time to get to know Martre and learn what made him happy, and she used that as a way to kill him.
I do still talk to both my mother and my sister on a regular basis. I do still believe they might not have done it, but Martre should be remembered as this really outgoing, kind person.
If Martre was alive today, I would see him living somewhere in California, being an artist.
I just want him to be remembered as artistic, intelligent, and beautiful soul.
It begins with something so small no one thought to remember it, a light left on a door not fully closed, a silence that feels just a second too long. London, October 1975. The air is damp, pressing low against the city like a weight. Street lamps flicker through a thin veil of fog, stretching shadows into something unnatural. Camden High Street hums with its usual rhythm, late-night footsteps, distant laughter, the hiss of buses exhaling at every stop. And then somewhere in that ordinary noise something goes wrong. At 9:42 p.m., Eleanor Briggs steps out of a narrow off-license, a paper bag tucked under her arm. Milk, cigarettes, a receipt folded carelessly into her coat pocket. She pulls her collar tighter against the cold and turns toward home. It should have taken her less than 5 minutes. She never makes it. No scream cuts through the night.
No crash.
No running footsteps. Just a seamless break in reality, as if the street itself swallowed her whole. By morning, her absence feels wrong in a way people can't quite explain. The kettle in her flat sits untouched. The bed remains unmade. A cardigan draped over the back of a chair, exactly where she left it. Nothing disturbed, nothing missing. Except Eleanor. At first, it's dismissed. Adults disappear. Plans change. People leave without telling anyone. But Eleanor doesn't fit that pattern. She has no packed bags, no withdrawals from her bank, no letters, no reason to vanish. And then, slowly, unease begins to settle in. A neighbor speaks first, a man who keeps to himself, rarely noticed. He tells police he heard something that night. Not loud, not dramatic. Just wrong. Footsteps on the stairwell. Heavy, uneven, slower than usual. He says Eleanor always walked quickly, keys already in hand, steps light and familiar. But this sounded different. There was a pause outside her door. Long enough to notice. Long enough to remember. Then nothing. No voice.
No greeting.
No sound of a key turning. And then, faintly, another door somewhere below opening. And closing. Police write it down. Another detail in a growing list of things that don't quite connect. Because at this stage, it's still not a crime. Not yet. That changes 48 hours later. The handbag is found. 2 miles away, Kentish Town, near a disused rail yard where weeds push through cracked concrete and rust eats through old iron fences. It isn't thrown. It isn't hidden. It's placed. Carefully, deliberately, as if someone wanted it to be found, but not immediately. Inside, everything is there. Her identification, Her keys. The receipt, 9:42 p.m., confirming the last known moment she existed in the world as it was supposed to be. No blood. No damage. No sign of struggle. Too clean. It's the kind of detail that doesn't comfort investigators. It unsettles them. Because chaos leaves marks. And this feels controlled. That's when the word begins to surface, quietly, behind closed doors. Abduction. The investigation shifts. The street is sealed. Officers retrace her final steps again and again, measuring distances, checking sight lines, trying to see what they missed. A bus driver comes forward. Route 29. Late evening run. He remembers a man standing near the corner, just past the off-license. At first, nothing unusual. People wait. People linger. But this man didn't move. Didn't smoke. Didn't pace. Just stood there. Watching. The driver passes again nearly 20 minutes later. The man is still there. Same position. Same direction. Still watching. The description is thin. Mid-30s, maybe. Dark coat. Average height. The kind of face that disappears the moment you look away. Police canvass the area again. More questions. Same answers. Until someone mentions the car. A woman, hesitant at first. Unsure if it matters. She recalls an engine running that night, parked just beyond the glow of the streetlight, partially swallowed by shadow. Lights off. She didn't think anything of it then. Now she does. Because she remembers the passenger door. Slightly open. Not wide. Not obvious. Just enough to suggest someone had been there or was about to be. That detail fractures the timeline. Because it introduces intention. Planning. A space prepared in advance. Suddenly, Eleanor's disappearance is no longer random. It's constructed. The search widens. More officers. More pressure. Canals are dragged. Parks combed. Empty buildings forced open and searched room by room. Nothing. No trace of her. No witnesses who saw her leave the street. No evidence she ever reached her building. It's as if she ceased to exist in the space between two streetlights. Days stretch into weeks. The community tightens. Doors lock earlier. Conversations drop to whispers. People begin to look twice at strangers, then 3 times. Because whoever did this didn't rush. Didn't panic. Didn't leave anything behind. And that's what frightens them. Then, without warning, something arrives. A letter. No return address. Postmarked from inside London. Typed. Short. You're looking in the wrong place. 8 words. Nothing more. No name. No demand.
No explanation.
Just a statement that lands like a blade. Police hesitate. Hoax letters aren't uncommon. Cases like this attract attention, curiosity, cruelty. But this feels different. Because it doesn't ask for anything. It doesn't brag. It doesn't explain. It corrects. As if the sender knows something. As if they've been watching the investigation unfold. And quietly disagreeing with it. The letter is analyzed.
Paper type. Ink.
Typewriter marks. Nothing conclusive.
No fingerprints.
Just absence again. The press begins to circle. Young woman vanishes in Camden. Police without answers. Family appeals for information. The story spreads slowly, but it spreads. And with it, unease deepens into fear. Because this isn't violence people understand. There's no scene, no evidence, no resolution. Just a gap. And the possibility that it could happen again. Months pass. Winter fades into a gray spring. Leads dry up. Witnesses grow uncertain. The bus driver isn't sure about the man anymore. The woman questions whether the car was even there. Memory begins to erode, softening edges, blurring facts into doubt. The case loses momentum. Files stack. Priorities shift. And Eleanor Briggs becomes something else. A photograph in a folder. A name on a list. A cold case. Unsolved. Unanswered. But not entirely forgotten. Because buried among the collected evidence, something remains. Something overlooked. A detail too small to matter at the time.
Logged. Filed.
Ignored. Waiting. Years pass. London changes. Buildings replaced. Streets reshaped. Faces come and go. But the file remains. Sealed.
Silent.
Until decades later someone opens it again. Not because of a breakthrough. Not because of a confession. But because of a question. A question about something that was there from the beginning. Something seen but not understood. And when it's finally looked at the right way, the silence surrounding Eleanor Briggs begins to fracture. Not loudly. Not all at once. But enough. Enough to suggest that what happened that night in 1975 was never random. Never spontaneous. And never over. Because somewhere hidden inside the smallest detail is a thread. And when it's pulled, it will lead back to a man who stood perfectly still under a dim London streetlight. Watching. Waiting. And knowing no one was looking at him closely enough. Time doesn't erase a crime like this, it buries it. Layer by layer. Dust over paper. Silence over questions. Memory over truth. But sometimes something small breaks through. And when it does, everything shifts. It happens quietly. Not a dramatic discovery. Not a confession. Not a body pulled from the ground. Just a review. A routine reassessment of archived files inside a London evidence facility, decades after the night Eleanor Briggs disappeared into nothing. Fluorescent lights hum overhead. Rows of sealed boxes stretch into shadow. Forgotten names. Forgotten faces. Forgotten lives reduced to labels and dates. And one of those labels reads, Briggs, Eleanor, missing, 1975. The file is opened again. Not because anyone expects answers, but because time has changed the tools. What once meant nothing might now mean everything. Inside, the contents are ordinary. Statements. Photographs. Reports typed on aging paper, edges yellowed, ink beginning to fade. But buried within it is something almost invisible. A receipt. The same one found inside Eleanor's handbag. 9:42 p.m. Camden High Street. At the time, it was nothing more than confirmation of her last known movement. But now it becomes something else. Because modern analysis doesn't just look at what's written. It looks at everything. The paper, the pressure, the microscopic traces left behind by human contact. And when technicians examine it under new methods, they find something that was never seen before. A partial print. Not clear, not complete, but enough. Enough to confirm one thing. It doesn't belong to Eleanor. That realization lands slowly. Then all at once. Because if someone else handled that receipt, it means they were close. Close enough to touch something she had just been holding. Close enough to exist in the same moment. The timeline tightens. The margin of error disappears. Whoever took her wasn't watching from a distance. They were there. Right beside her. The discovery triggers a chain reaction. The case is reopened. Not publicly at first. Not yet. Internally.
Quietly.
A small team assigned to re-examine everything from the beginning. Every statement, every overlooked detail, every inconsistency buried under decades of assumption. And as they begin to rebuild the case, something unsettling emerges. The original investigation missed more than just a fingerprint. It missed a pattern. Because Eleanor Briggs may not have been the first. Old reports are pulled. Unsolved disappearances. Late 60s, early 70s. Women. Similar age. Similar routines. Vanished at night. Within walking distance of home.
No witnesses. No bodies.
At the time, they were treated as separate cases. Unrelated. Unconnected. But now when placed side by side, they begin to align. Locations overlap. Time frames compress. Details echo. A figure seen standing still. A vehicle parked just out of view. Moments of silence where something should have happened but didn't. It's not proof. But it's enough to disturb. Enough to suggest that what happened to Eleanor wasn't isolated.
It was part of something.
Something deliberate. The team digs deeper. They revisit the bus driver's statement. The man in the dark coat. Standing still. Watching. At the time, he was nothing more than a passing detail. Now he becomes central. Because his behavior doesn't fit randomness. It fits waiting. Waiting for something specific. Or someone. Old composite sketches are retrieved.
Rough.
Incomplete. Built from fading memory. But even in their inaccuracy, they carry weight. A shape. A presence. A suggestion of someone who learned how not to be remembered. And then another detail resurfaces. The car. That idling engine. Lights off. Passenger door slightly open. In 1975, it was speculation. Now it's structure. A system. A method. The pieces begin to form something more coherent. A man watches. A car waits. A moment appears. And then nothing.
Clean. Silent. Gone.
The investigation shifts again. From who took Eleanor to how many times it had already happened. Records expand. Names are added. Files once closed are reopened. Families who stopped expecting answers receive calls they never thought would come. Old wounds tear open. Old questions return. Because the possibility is worse than a single crime. It's repetition. It's intent. It's someone who operated undetected for years, maybe longer. And then a break. Not in the past. In the present. The partial print recovered from the receipt is run through modern databases. At first, nothing. No immediate match. But that's expected. Records from the 1970s are incomplete. Many individuals were never logged, never processed, never recorded. But technology doesn't stop at direct matches anymore. It looks for relationships. Family links, genetic patterns, indirect connections. And slowly a signal begins to emerge. Not a name. Not yet.
Just a possibility.
A familial link to someone in the system. Someone still alive. The investigation tightens its focus. They trace the connection. Build outward. Construct a map of relatives, locations, timelines. And then they find him. Not a criminal. Not on any watch list. No violent history. No record that would ever have brought him into suspicion. A man who lived quietly. Worked consistently. Moved through life without disturbance. But when his history is examined, something doesn't sit right. In 1975, he was there. Camden. Within walking distance of where Eleanor was last seen. And more than that, His movements align with the other disappearances. Different addresses, different years, but always close enough. Close enough to matter. Close enough to disturb. Surveillance begins. Quiet, controlled.
No arrests, no confrontation.
Just observation. Because after decades of silence, they can't afford to be wrong. Days turn into weeks. The man lives normally.
Shops, walks, talks.
Nothing unusual. Nothing that screams guilt. And yet something lingers. In the way he watches people. In the way he pauses just a second too long. In the way he seems aware, without ever looking directly. It's subtle, but it's there. And then they find something else. Not in his present. In his past. A vehicle registration. A car he owned briefly. Dark color. Sold months after Eleanor disappeared. Records are incomplete. But one detail remains. A note from the original registration file. Passenger side door damage. Repaired.
No explanation.
No report. Just fixed. That detail lands heavily. Because suddenly the open door scene that night feels real. Feels physical. Feels connected. The case begins to close in.
Slowly. Carefully. Piece by piece.
A man who is there. A car that matches. A fingerprint that leads back to him through bloodline. And a pattern of disappearances that no longer looks random. But they still don't have everything. No direct evidence placing him with Eleanor.
No confession.
No body. Just a tightening circle of probability. And one question that refuses to go away. Why did he stop? Because after Eleanor, the disappearances end. No more reports. No more patterns. Just silence. And silence like that is rarely accidental. It suggests a change. A trigger. Or a mistake. Something that forced him to stop. Or convinced him he no longer needed to continue. And that question becomes the most dangerous part of the case. Because if they understand why it ended, they might finally understand what happened that night. And if they understand that, then the silence that lasted nearly 50 years will finally break. Not with speculation, not with theory, but with something far more unsettling. The truth about a man who stood perfectly still in the dark and waited for the exact moment no one was watching. Silence doesn't just hide the truth, it reshapes it. Years pass, and what once felt urgent begins to feel distant. Edges blur. Details soften. People convince themselves that what they remember might not be what actually happened. And that's exactly where someone like him survives. Not in the shadows, but in the fading. The investigation moves carefully now.
No sudden moves.
No public announcements. Just a slow tightening around a man who has lived nearly half a century without anyone asking the right questions. His name doesn't matter yet. Not to the public. Not even to the story. Because right now he's still just a possibility. A shape forming in the dark. Surveillance continues. Day after day, he follows routine. Predictable. Controlled. Almost rehearsed. Morning walks. Same route. Same pace. Groceries bought at the same shop. Same items. Same cashier. Even his pauses feel deliberate. Measured. As if he learned long ago that randomness attracts attention but repetition disappears into the background. Investigators watch everything. Not just what he does, but how he does it. Because people like him don't make obvious mistakes. They make small ones. And small mistakes take time to reveal themselves. his home becomes the next focus. A modest property, quiet street, nothing that draws attention. The kind of place neighbors describe the same way every time. Normal. Quiet. Kept to himself. Inside they don't yet know. But they begin building a profile. Old employment records surface. Night shifts. Irregular hours. Jobs that allowed movement without question. Maintenance work. Delivery routes. Positions where being unnoticed wasn't unusual, it was expected. That detail matters. Because it explains something the original investigation never could. Access. Freedom of movement. The ability to be present without being remembered. And then something shifts. A new review of Eleanor's timeline reveals a gap. Small, but critical. The receipt says 9:42 p.m. But the off-license owner recalls her leaving closer to 9:40. At the time, that discrepancy meant nothing. 2 minutes. Margin of error. Human memory. But now it becomes a window. 2 minutes where something could have happened. Or someone could have approached her. That's when they revisit the shop. Not the building, it's long gone. Replaced. Renovated. History erased by progress. But records remain. Old supplier logs. Layout diagrams. Photographs taken years later. And within those fragments they reconstruct the space. Narrow entrance. Limited visibility from a street. A corner just inside, where someone could stand unseen from outside. That detail changes perspective. Because it suggests something new. Eleanor may not have been taken outside. She may have been intercepted before she ever stepped fully back into the street. And if that's true, then the man wasn't just waiting. He was inside. Close enough to touch. Close enough to take control without noise. That realization tightens everything. Because it means planning went deeper than anyone assumed. It wasn't opportunistic. It was precise. The team revisits witness statements again. Looking not for what was said, but for what was dismissed. And there it is. A line buried in a report, overlooked, unimportant at the time. A customer, unidentified, mentioned briefly by the shop owner. A man standing near the back, didn't buy anything, left quickly. That's all. No description worth noting. No reason to follow up. But now it becomes central. Because it places someone inside that space. At the exact moment Eleanor was there. The investigation pivots. From the street to the interior. From waiting to execution. They return to the suspect. Look deeper into his past. And this time, they don't just look at where he lived. They look at where he worked. A short-term job. Stockroom assistant. At a supplier linked to that very off-license. It's not direct employment. But it's close enough. Close enough to know the layout. Close enough to understand the blind spots. Close enough to feel familiar inside that space. That detail doesn't prove anything. But it builds something far more dangerous. Consistency. Pattern. Opportunity. And then another fragment surfaces. Old police notes. Never acted on. A report of a vehicle seen earlier that same evening. Different witness. Different location. But similar description. Dark car. Engine running. Lights off. Driver inside. Watching. At the time, it was dismissed. Unrelated. Coincidence. But now it aligns. Because it suggests something bigger than a single moment. It suggests staging. Preparation. A sequence of actions leading to a single point. The abduction wasn't the beginning. It was the final step. the result of something already in motion. Investigators begin mapping it.
Time.
Movement. Positioning. Where the car was seen. Where the man stood. Where Eleanor entered the shop. And where she was last confirmed alive. The lines begin to connect. Not perfectly, but enough. Enough to see intention. Enough to see control. And then something unexpected happens. The suspect notices. Not directly.
No confrontation.
No visible reaction. But something changes. His routine shifts.
Subtly. Routes Alter.
Timing adjusts. Small enough that most people wouldn't see it. But investigators do. Because they've been watching too closely. And that realization hits hard. Because it means one thing. He's aware. Not of the investigation. Not of the surveillance. But of something. Something internal. A pressure. A memory. A disturbance. As if something long buried is beginning to surface again. That's when they make a decision. They need more than observation. They need confirmation. They obtain a warrant. Not for arrest. For collection. A discarded item. Something he's touched. Something that carries his DNA. The process is quiet. Controlled. Legal. A cup. Left behind at a cafe he visits regularly. Collected. Processed. Compared. The wait is short. But it feels long. Because this is the moment everything depends on. If it matches, the past comes back to life. If it doesn't, the case collapses back into silence. The result arrives. And for a second no one speaks. Because it's not just a match. It's precise. The partial print from 1975. And the DNA from the present.
Connect.
Not through assumption. Not through theory. Through science. Through certainty. The man who stood in the dark. The man who may have been inside that shop. The man who lived quietly for decades. Was there. Right there. In the final moments before Eleanor Briggs disappeared. The room shifts. The weight of it settles. Because this isn't suspicion anymore. It's presence. It's proximity. It's truth pressing through nearly 50 years of silence. But one thing still remains. The most important thing. What happened next? Because being there isn't the same as being responsible. And the difference between those two truths is everything. The investigation moves toward its next step. Not with urgency, but with precision. Because after all this time, there's only one chance to get it right. One chance to confront a man who has lived untouched by his past. One chance to ask the question that has echoed since 1975. And one chance to finally hear the answer. From the man who waited in the shadows. And believed no one would ever come back for him. Truth doesn't arrive all at once, it leaks. Slowly, quietly, through cracks that were never meant to open again. And once it starts, it doesn't stop. The match changes everything. Not theory, not probability, not instinct. Certainty. For nearly 50 years, the case of Eleanor Briggs lived in silence, held together by fragments, shaped by absence. Now, for the first time, something solid exists. A connection that cannot be explained away. A presence that cannot be denied. He was there. The man they've been watching. The man who built a life so ordinary it dissolved into the background. Now he becomes the center of everything. But certainty doesn't mean closure. Because one truth leads to another. And the most important one still waits untouched. What happened after 9:42 p.m.? The team moves carefully. An arrest now would be premature, dangerous, without a body, without a confession, without direct evidence of the act itself. The case could collapse. And if it collapses, it disappears again. This time for good. So they wait. And they prepare. Every detail of his life is pulled apart, not just where he was, but who he was. Old records, employment history, addresses stretching back decades. Patterns begin to form. Not obvious ones. Not the kind that scream. But quiet consistencies. Short-term jobs. Frequent relocations. No deep ties.
No lasting relationships.
A man who existed on the edges of other people's lives, never fully inside them. Neighbors describe him the same way across different years, different streets. Polite. Private. Kept to himself. Words that sound harmless. Until you hear them repeated too many times. Until you realize they describe absence, not presence. He wasn't known.
He was tolerated.
And that distinction matters. Because people who are known leave impressions. People who are tolerated disappear. Investigators dig deeper into his early years. Not just adulthood. Childhood. And that's where something darker begins to take shape. Fragments of reports. School records. A mention of behavioral issues. Nothing criminal. Nothing violent. But concerning. Isolation. Episodes of withdrawal. Moments where teachers noted something difficult to define. A lack of emotional response. A stillness. That word appears more than once.
Still.
Unmoving. Observing. The same behavior described decades later by a bus driver on a London street. It's not proof. But it's alignment. A thread that runs from childhood into the moment Eleanor Briggs disappeared. And beyond. The investigation begins to consider something more unsettling. Not just that he was there, but that he had been preparing for a very long time. The car becomes the next focus. Records are incomplete, but enough remains to reconstruct its existence. Registered in his name in early 1975. Sold abruptly months later.
No explanation.
No follow-up. Just gone. But the repair note remains. Passenger side door damage. Repaired quickly. No incident report. No insurance claim. Just fixed. That detail sits heavily. Because it suggests something physical. Something that happened inside that vehicle. Something that required repair. And something that was never explained. Investigators search for more. Garages, mechanics, old business records. Most are gone.
Closed. Replaced.
Forgotten. But one survives. A small repair shop that kept handwritten logs longer than most. Faded ink. Fragile paper. But still readable. And inside a record. No name. Just a date. Late October 1975. Vehicle description matching his. Repair noted. Interior panel, passenger side. Damage.
Requested immediate fix.
No details of how. No questions asked. Just work completed. That entry doesn't prove violence. But it suggests force. Enough to damage the inside of a car door. Enough to require urgency. Enough to matter. The timeline tightens again. Eleanor disappears. Days later the car is repaired. Weeks later it's sold. Sequence. Action. Removal. It feels deliberate. too deliberate to ignore. The team builds a reconstruction. Not speculation. Structure. A possible chain of events. Eleanor enters the shop. He's already inside. Watching. Waiting. She leaves.
He follows.
The street is quiet. The car is close. The door is open. Something happens.
Fast.
Controlled.
Silent.
She disappears. The door closes. And the city continues as if nothing happened. That reconstruction is never spoken aloud. Not yet. Because it still lacks the one thing they need. Confirmation. And that means they need him. The decision is made. It's time. Not an arrest. An interview. Voluntary. Controlled. Carefully planned. Because how he responds matters as much as what he says. He's contacted. Simple.
Direct.
Routine inquiry. A reopened case. Old questions. Nothing more. He agrees. Without hesitation. That detail alone sends a ripple through the team. Because most people pause. Most people question. He doesn't. The interview room is neutral. No pressure.
No aggression.
Just conversation. At first, he's exactly what they expect.
Calm.
Measured. Polite. His voice steady. His answers precise. He acknowledges living in Camden in 1975. Acknowledges working nearby. Acknowledges owning a car. Nothing denied. Nothing hidden. But nothing offered. Every answer feels contained. As if he knows exactly how much to give and no more. Then they ask about Eleanor. He pauses. Just for a second. Barely noticeable. But it's there. The first break in rhythm. I don't remember her, he says.
Simple. Clean.
But something about it feels rehearsed. Because forgetting someone is easy. Forgetting a night like that is harder. They press gently. Mention the shop. Mention the street. Mention the time. His posture doesn't change. But his eyes do. A flicker.
Quick. Gone.
Then steady again. He repeats it. I don't remember. The interview continues. Details, locations, movements. He answers everything. But nothing connects. Nothing slips. Nothing breaks. Until they show him the evidence.
Not all of it.
Just enough. The fingerprint. Recovered from the receipt. Matched through familial DNA. His presence confirmed. This time, he doesn't answer immediately. Silence fills the room. Heavy. Thick. Unavoidable. And in that silence, something shifts. Not panic. Not fear. Something else. Recognition. As if a door inside him has just opened. Slowly, he exhales. And for the first time since the interview began,
he stops performing. I was there, he says.
The words land without resistance.
No denial. No deflection.
Just acceptance. The room stills. Because that's the moment everything changes. Not when the case reopened. Not when the evidence matched.
But now.
Right here. When the man who stood in the dark finally acknowledges he was part of the night that never ended. But he doesn't say more. Not yet. Because truth, like silence, doesn't come all at once. It waits.
Builds.
And when it finally surfaces, it brings everything with it.
The past.
The moment. And the part no one has been able to reach. What happened after she disappeared into the dark. A single sentence can shift the weight of 50 years. I was there.
No hesitación. No corrección.
No attempt to soften it. Just truth placed carefully on the table. And once it's there, it can't be taken back. The room doesn't react immediately. No raised voices. No sudden movement. Because this is the moment they've been building toward. Not an accusation. Not a confrontation. But a fracture. A crack in something that has remained sealed for decades. He sits still. Hands folded, eyes steady. But the stillness feels different now. Before, it was control. Now, it feels like calculation. Because acknowledging presence is not the same as admitting guilt. It's a step. A controlled step. One he has chosen. And that means he's still managing the narrative. They let the silence stretch. Because silence invites more. And for a moment it works. He leans back slightly, breath slow. Then he speaks again. I didn't touch her. It comes quickly.
Too quickly.
As if the thought was already waiting. As if he knew what would come next and decided to get ahead of it. That sentence lands differently. Because now, for the first time, he has defined a boundary. Not what happened, but what he claims didn't happen. And that matters. Because people who are truly uninvolved don't draw lines like that. They don't need to. The investigators shift.
Carefully.
They don't challenge him directly. Not yet. They move sideways. Ask about the shop. The layout. Why he was there. This time he answers with more detail. I used to go in sometimes. Warm place. Close to work. It sounds harmless. It sounds reasonable. But it places him exactly where the investigation needs him to be. Inside. At the right time. In the right position. They ask about the man seen outside. The one standing still. Watching. He pauses again. Longer this time. Then a small shake of the head. I don't know anything about that. The denial is expected. But it carries something new. Distance. As if he's trying to separate himself from that image. From that behavior. From that stillness. But the problem is the stillness is him. It's always been him. They shift again. The car. His car. Dark color. Engine running. Passenger door slightly open. He listens.
No interruption.
No reaction. Then quietly. I had a car back then.
No elaboración. No denial.
Just acknowledgement. Piece by piece he's allowing them to build it. But only within limits he controls. And that's where the danger lies. Because as long as he controls the pace, he controls the outcome. The investigators change strategy. They stop asking what happened. And start asking why. Why he was there so late. Why he didn't come forward. Why he never spoke about it for nearly 50 years. That question lingers. Because it forces something deeper. Not memory. But intent. He doesn't answer immediately. His gaze drops slightly. Not in guilt. In thought. As if he's deciding which version of himself to present. Then slowly. I didn't think it mattered. That answer feels wrong. Not just insufficient.
Wrong.
Because a young woman disappeared that night. A woman he now admits he was near. And yet he believed his presence didn't matter. That disconnect sends something cold through the room. Because it suggests perspective. A way of seeing events that removes responsibility, that minimizes significance, that allows him to exist at the center of something without acknowledging its gravity. They press gently. You were in the shop, at the same time, on the same night, and you didn't think that mattered? This time, he looks up.
Direct.
Unblinking.
No.
One word. Flat.
Certain.
And in that moment something becomes clear. This isn't just about what happened in 1975. It's about how he understood it. How he justified it. How he lived with it. The interview shifts again. Less about facts. More about him. His routines. His life. His habits. Because somewhere inside that is the answer they need. And then it appears. Unexpected. Unplanned. They ask about his work back then. Stockroom assistant. Delivery support. Odd hours. Night shifts. Movement across the city. He describes it simply. Without detail. But then he adds something. Something small. I used to stay out late sometimes. After work. The room sharpens. Because that detail wasn't asked for. It wasn't necessary. And yet he offered it. They follow it. Doing what? He shrugs slightly. Walking, driving, just being out. The phrasing is vague. But the pattern is not. Late nights. Movement. Presence in places where others weren't paying attention. The investigators don't need to say it. They can see it forming. A routine. A habit. A behavior repeated enough times to become invisible. They shift again.
Carefully.
They bring up the other disappearances. Not accusations. Just names.
Dates.
Locations. Women who vanished under similar circumstances. He listens.
Still. No interruption.
No visible reaction. But something changes. Attention. Subtle. But real. As if those names carry weight. Not recognition. Not exactly. But proximity. As if they exist too close to something he knows. They ask directly. Did you ever see any of them? He answers immediately.
No.
Too fast. Too clean. The kind of answer that closes a door before anyone has a chance to look inside. And that's when they understand. This isn't just about Eleanor. It never was. Because the way he answers, the way he controls information, the way he distances himself. It suggests repetition. Not a single moment. But multiple. And suddenly the question changes. Not what happened that night. But how many nights like that existed? The interview continues. Hours pass. The same pattern repeats. Admission. Denial. Distance. Control. He gives them just enough to move forward, but never enough to finish. Until they return to the one thing he hasn't addressed. The moment after. You were there, they say quietly. You saw her. You were inside the shop. He nods. Yes. What happened when she left? Silence. Longer this time. Heavy. Because this is the point where presence becomes action. Where observation becomes involvement. Where everything changes. He doesn't look away. Doesn't shift. Doesn't break. But something inside him tightens. I don't remember, he says. And this time it doesn't feel like truth. It feels like a wall. Deliberate. Constructed. Maintained. Because everything before this, he's been willing to acknowledge. But this is where the past becomes something he cannot allow to surface. Not fully. Not yet. The investigators don't push harder.
Not now.
Because they've already gained something critical. Not a confession. Not a conclusion. But a fracture. A break in a story that has remained untouched for decades. He was there.
He saw her.
He stayed silent. And he chose never to come forward. Those facts alone shift the entire weight of the case. But they also raise something far more unsettling. If he was willing to admit that much, what is he still hiding? Because people don't stop at the edge of truth. They stop where the truth becomes dangerous. And that means just beyond what he said is everything they've been trying to reach. The moment. The act. The reason. And until that surfaces. The silence that began in 1975 still isn't over. It's just finally starting to crack. Silence can protect a person, but it can also trap them. Because once you begin to speak, you can't control what comes next. And he has already started. I was there. 3 words that reopened a door he had kept sealed for nearly half a century. Now, everything that follows presses against it from the other side. The interview room feels smaller. Not physically, but psychologically. The space between questions and answers tightens, as if the air itself is waiting for something to break. He sits exactly the same. Same posture, same controlled breathing, same steady gaze. But control isn't the same as certainty. And now certainty is slipping. The investigators shift their approach. They stop asking him to remember and start forcing him to confront what he already knows. You said you were there, one of them repeats, voice calm, even. You were inside the shop. You saw her. A pause. Then a nod. Yes. And when she left, you followed her? Silence. Not immediate denial. Not immediate agreement. Just silence. And in that silence, something begins to move.
Slowly.
Reluctantly. I walked out after her, he says. The words are quiet. Measured. But they change everything. Because now, the distance between him and Eleanor disappears completely. He wasn't just present. He wasn't just nearby. He moved. He acted. He closed the gap. The investigators don't react outwardly. But inside the room, the shift is immediate. Because this is the first real step beyond observation. Beyond coincidence. Into involvement. Why, they ask. Simple question. But it carries weight. Because it demands intention. He exhales slowly. Eyes drift for just a second. Then return. I don't know. The answer lands hollow. Not because it's impossible, but because it's incomplete. People don't follow strangers into the night without a reason. Even if they don't understand it themselves, something drives that choice. And he's still holding that back. They move forward. You followed her to the street? Yes. Did she see you? Another pause. Then I think so. That detail sharpens the moment. Because it introduces awareness. Connection. A brief, fragile link between 2 people who should have remained strangers. What happened then? This is the question. The one everything has been building toward. The line between past and truth. And he knows it. You can see it. In the way his fingers tighten slightly. In the way his jaw sets just a fraction harder. In the way the stillness returns but now feels forced. She kept walking, he says. And you? I stopped. The answer comes too clean. Too controlled. As if it's been prepared. As if it's the version he's decided to live with. But it doesn't match. Not with the fingerprint. Not with the car. Not with the open passenger door waiting in the dark. The investigators let it sit. Because contradiction doesn't need to be pointed out immediately. It needs to build. To press. To force its own way through. You stopped, one of them repeats softly. And then what? I went home. Another clean answer. Another wall. But this one is thinner. Because now the timeline is too tight. Too precise. Too full of details that don't align. They shift again. Not toward accusation. Toward memory. You said she might have seen you, they continue. Did she say anything? Silence. Longer now. Because this isn't about movement. It's about interaction. And interaction is harder to hide. His gaze drops again. Not in avoidance. In recall. As if something is there just beneath the surface. Something he has spent years refusing to revisit. I don't remember exactly, he says slowly. Maybe she looked back. The room stills. Because that image is powerful. A woman walking home. Sensing something. Turning slightly. Seeing someone behind her. A moment of uncertainty. A moment that could have ended differently. But didn't. What did you do when she looked back? They ask. His breathing changes. Just slightly. But enough. I kept walking, he says. Closer? He hesitates. And that hesitation is everything. Yes. There it is. The truth beginning to push through. Not all at once. Not clearly. But undeniably. He didn't stop. He closed the distance. Step by step. Decision by decision. Until the moment could no longer be undone. The investigators move carefully now. Because pushing too hard could shut him down completely. But not pushing risks losing the momentum. You followed her toward the car, one of them says. Not a question. A statement. He doesn't respond immediately. Because now they've crossed into something he hasn't admitted yet. Something physical. Something real. I have my car parked nearby, he says finally. The admission lands heavily. Because it confirms what has only existed as theory until now. The car wasn't coincidence. It was part of it. Part of the plan. Or, at least part of the opportunity. You open the passenger door, they continue. Another statement. Another step forward. His jaw tightens. Eyes flicker, for just a second. Yes. The word is barely audible. But it's enough. Because now the scene is no longer abstract. It's real. A street. A car. A door open in the dark. And a man standing close enough to change everything. What happened next? The question hangs. He doesn't answer. Not immediately. Because this is where the line disappears completely. Where presence becomes action. Where everything he has avoided becomes unavoidable. His hands shift. For the first time since the interview began. Fingers interlock. Grip tightens. As if holding on to something. Or holding something back. She hesitated, he says. The words come slowly. As if each one has to be pulled from somewhere deep. She stopped walking. The image sharpens again. A woman sensing danger. Pausing. Not yet running. Not yet reacting. just unsure. And you? Another pause. Longer. He closes his eyes briefly. Not in emotion. In effort. I spoke to her. The room changes. Because now there's voice. Interaction. Contact. What did you say? He shakes his head slightly. I don't remember. But this time it feels different. Not like a lie. Like a fracture. As if memory itself has become unstable. As if the moment is too close to something he cannot fully access. Or refuses to. What happened after you spoke to her? Silence again. But this silence is heavier. Because now there's nowhere left to go but forward. No more distance. No more separation. Just the moment itself. And he knows it. You can see it in the way his breathing slows. In the way his shoulders tense. In the way the stillness returns but now feels like resistance. I don't want to say, he whispers. The words barely carry. But they land harder than anything before. Because that's not denial. That's choice. A decision to stop. To hold the line. To keep whatever comes next buried. And in that moment, everything becomes clear. Not what happened. Not yet. But where the truth is. Just beyond that sentence. Just beyond his refusal. Just beyond the part he cannot allow himself to speak. The investigators don't push further.
Not now.
Because they've reached the edge. The place where pressure could break him or shut him down completely. And after 50 years, they can't risk losing him here. But they've gained something more valuable than a full confession. They've found the boundary. The exact point where memory turns into something else. Something darker. Something he has carried alone for nearly half a century. And now that boundary has a shape. A location. A moment. A car.
A door.
A hesitation. And whatever happened next. The part he won't say. The part he can't say. Is no longer hidden in the past. It's here. In the room. Waiting. And it won't stay silent forever. There's a moment in every interrogation when silence stops protecting the truth and starts suffocating it. He has reached that moment. I don't want to say. The words are quiet, fragile, but they carry more weight than anything he's admitted so far. Because they draw a line. A clear, deliberate boundary between what he is willing to let the world know and what he has buried for nearly 50 years. But the problem with buried things is that once disturbed, they don't stay where they are. They rise. Slowly at first. Then all at once. The room holds steady. No one moves too quickly. No one reacts too sharply. Because they understand something critical now. He isn't refusing because he has nothing to say. He's refusing because he has too much. And the moment he lets it out, it won't stop. So they change approach again. Not pressure. Not confrontation. But patience. They let the silence stretch longer than before. Long enough for discomfort to settle in. Long enough for him to feel the weight of what he's holding. Because silence works both ways.
It protects.
But it also exposes. Minutes pass. The ticking clock becomes louder than it should be. The air feels heavier. And for the first time since the interview began, he shifts. Not just his hands. His entire posture. A slight lean forward. A subtle break in that rigid stillness he has maintained for hours. It's small, but it's the first sign of something cracking. You spoke to her, one of the investigators says quietly. You opened the door. She stopped.
No accusación.
Just reconstruction. A mirror held up to what he's already admitted. He doesn't respond immediately. But he doesn't deny it either. That matters. Because silence now is no longer neutral. It's confirmation. You don't want to say what happened next, they continue. But you remember. Another pause. Longer this time. Then a breath. Slow. Controlled. But deeper than before. I remember parts, he says. The words come carefully. As if he's testing them. As if each one risks opening something he spent decades keeping closed. What parts, they ask. He looks down. Not to avoid, but to focus. To find the edge of the memory without falling into it. She didn't want to get in the car, he says. The sentence lands heavy. Because it introduces resistance.
Choice.
A moment where everything could still have stopped. She stepped back. The image sharpens again. A street, a car, a door open. A woman realizing something is wrong. And trying to create distance. What did you do? They ask. He doesn't answer right away. His fingers tighten again. Grip hard. As if holding on to control or losing it. I told her it was okay, he says finally. The words are soft. Almost calm. But they carry something deeply unsettling. Because reassurance in that moment isn't kindness. It's manipulation. It's control. And she believed you? He shakes his head slightly.
No.
Another shift. Because now the illusion breaks. The moment where words fail. And something else takes over. What happened then? Silence again. But this silence feels different. Closer. More unstable. As if the memory is right there just beneath the surface pushing upward. He exhales.
Long.
Slow. Then it happens. I grabbed her. The words come out flat. Almost disconnected. As if he's describing something that didn't belong to him. But it did. And it does. The room doesn't move. But everything changes. Because now the truth has crossed the line. From presence to action. From observation to violence. She tried to pull away, he continues. The sentences begin to come faster now. Not rushed. But less controlled. As if once the first piece fell, the rest started to follow. She was shouting. That detail hits hard. Because until now the night has been silent.
Clean.
Controlled. Now it fractures.
Noise.
Struggle.
Fear.
What did you do? They ask. He closes his eyes briefly. And this time it's not effort. It's recall. I pushed her into the car. The image becomes unavoidable. A forced movement. A break in control. A moment where everything becomes irreversible. The investigators stay steady. Because this is the point where people often retreat. Where they shut down. Where the truth becomes too real. But he doesn't stop. Not this time. I didn't mean to, he begins. Then stops. The sentence hangs unfinished. Because intention is complicated. And right now he's standing too close to it. You didn't mean to what? They ask. He shakes his head. I didn't think it would go that far. That phrase lands with a different kind of weight. Because it suggests escalation. Something that started smaller. Something that grew. Something that moved beyond what he expected or wanted to admit. What did you think would happen? They press gently. He doesn't answer immediately. Because that question reaches deeper. Into motive. Into purpose. into something he has avoided entirely. I just wanted to talk to her, he says. The words sound almost absurd in the space they now occupy. Because nothing about what he has described leads to conversation. But in his mind, maybe it did. Or maybe that's the version he has lived with for 50 years. The version that allowed him to sleep. To exist. To continue. The investigators don't challenge it directly. Because whether it's true or not, it's part of how he understands himself. And understanding that is critical. You forced her into the car, one of them says quietly. She was shouting. She was trying to get away. He nods. Slow. Deliberate. Yes. And then, that question lands again. He hesitates. Because now they are approaching the point of no return. The moment after which there is no distance left.
No separación.
Just the act itself. And whatever followed. His breathing changes again. Shallow.
Faster.
The controls slipping further. I drove, he says. Where? I don't remember exactly. But this time the answer feels different. Less like a wall. More like fragmentation. As if the memory exists but not clearly. Or not in a way he can face directly. You had to stop somewhere, they continue. What happened when you stopped? He doesn't answer. Not immediately. Because this is where everything collapses into one moment. The moment that defines everything that came before and everything that followed. And for the first time, he looks uncertain. Not calculated. Not controlled. Uncertain. As if he's standing at the edge of something he hasn't looked at in decades. Something he has avoided completely. I don't, he starts. Then stops. Because even now part of him is still resisting. Still trying to keep that final piece buried. But the difference is, it's no longer buried alone. It's surrounded.
Pressed. Exposed.
And slowly, inevitably, it's coming to the surface. The investigators don't push harder. Not yet. Because they can see it.
The break.
The fracture widening. The moment building. And they know one thing for certain. He's already crossed the line he thought he never would. He's admitted presence. He's admitted action. He's admitted force. And that means what comes next isn't a question of if. It's a question of when. Because the truth doesn't stop halfway. It doesn't stay contained. Once it begins, it finishes. And somewhere just beyond the edge of what he said is the moment that has remained hidden for nearly 50 years. The moment that turned a quiet London night into something that would never fully disappear.
And now,
it's closer than it has ever been. There is a point where memory stops protecting you and starts turning against you. He's there now. You can see it in the way his eyes no longer hold steady, in the way his breathing has lost its rhythm, in the way every pause feels less like control and more like collapse waiting to happen. He has already said too much. And not enough. I drove, he told them. A simple sentence. But behind it a road that leads somewhere he has avoided for nearly 50 years. The investigators don't rush. Because they understand something critical. The closer he gets to the truth, the more fragile it becomes. Push too hard, and it breaks. Pull too gently, and it slips away. So they hold him there. At the edge. You drove. One of them repeats quietly. She was in the car. She was trying to get out. He nods. Small. Barely visible. Yes. Was she still shouting? Another pause. Then not as much. That answer lands in a way that feels wrong, because it suggests something changed. Something reduced the noise, the resistance, the fear. And whatever that something is, it sits just beyond the words he's willing to say. You left Camden, they continue. Where did you go? He stares forward.
Not at them.
Not at anything. Just forward. As if the answer isn't in the room. As if it's somewhere far behind him, buried in time. I took back roads, he says. The phrasing is vague, but intentional. Avoiding names. Avoiding specifics. Avoiding anything that can be traced. But it confirms movement. Distance. Separation from the place where everything began. You are trying not to be seen, they say. He doesn't respond. But he doesn't deny it either. Silence now is agreement. The room tightens again. Because the picture is becoming clearer. Not perfect, but enough.
A man.
A car. A woman forced inside. A route chosen to avoid attention. A destination not yet spoken. What happened in the car, they ask. The question sits heavier than the others. Because it doesn't ask where. Or when. It asks what. And that's where truth becomes difficult. He exhales.
Long.
Slow. As if trying to push something out of himself without letting it fully form. She kept asking me to stop, he says. The words come softer now. Less controlled. More human. She said she wouldn't tell anyone. That detail shifts everything again. Because it introduces negotiation. Desperation. A moment where she believed there was still a way out. A moment where she tried to reach something inside him. Did you believe her, they ask. He shakes his head.
No.
The answer is immediate. Firm. Because belief wasn't part of it. Control was. Fear was. And something deeper, something he still hasn't named. What did you do when she said that? Silence. But shorter this time. Because the distance between question and answer is shrinking. I told her to be quiet, he says. And when she didn't? Another pause. Then a shift. Subtle. But undeniable. His shoulders tighten. His hands press together harder. As if the next part carries weight he can no longer avoid. I reached over. The sentence breaks slightly. Not clean. Not controlled. And that fracture matters. Reached over how? They press gently. He closes his eyes. Just for a second. And when he opens them again, something has changed. Not fully. But enough. I grab her again, he says. The repetition lands hard. Because it confirms escalation. Not a single act. But multiple. A continuation. A pattern forming within a single moment. She was trying to open the door. That detail cuts through everything. Because it's instinct. Survival. The simplest form of escape.
And it failed.
What did you do? They ask. The question comes softer now. Because the answer is already beginning to show itself. He doesn't respond immediately. Because this is where the memory sharpens. Where fragments become images. Where distance disappears. And what remains is real. I pulled her back, he says.
His voice is lower now.
Less certain. Less constructed. She hit the door. The room stills. Because now there is impact.
Force.
Something physical that leaves marks. Something that explains the repair. Passenger side door damage. Not an accident. Not wear and tear. A moment. Captured in metal. preserved in silence. Did she stop fighting? They ask. He hesitates. Longer than before. Because this question carries something final. Something close to the point of no return.
For a bit, he says.
That answer lands wrong. Because it suggests temporary. Not resolution. Not an end. Just a pause. And that means something else happened next. Something that changed everything. You kept driving, they continue. He nods. Yes. How long? I don't know. But this time the uncertainty feels real. Because time doesn't move normally in moments like that. It stretches. Breaks. Becomes something impossible to measure. You had to stop somewhere, they say. You remember that. He doesn't answer. Not right away. Because this is it. The place where the road ends. Where movement stops. And something irreversible begins. His breathing shifts again. Faster now. Less controlled. As if the memory is no longer something he's choosing to access. It's something that's pushing back. I pulled over, he says. The words come slowly.
Carefully.
As if each one is stepping onto unstable ground. Where? They ask. He shakes his head. I don't know the exact place. But he knows.
You can see it.
Not in clarity. But in feeling. In the way his expression tightens. In the way his voice lowers. As if the location itself carries something he can't fully face. What happened when you stopped? Silence. Heavy.
Long.
Because this is the moment. The one everything has been leading toward. The one he has avoided. The one he tried to bury under years of routine silence distance.
And now.
It's here. In the room. Waiting. He doesn't look at them. Doesn't look anywhere. Just sits there. Caught between holding on and letting go. I don't, he begins. Then stops. Because even now part of him is still resisting. Still trying to keep that final piece locked away. But the difference is, it's no longer fully under his control. The memory is there. Close.
Osta.
And every question brings it closer. The investigators don't push harder. Not yet. Because they can feel it. The shift. The moment building. The edge giving way. He has already taken them further than anyone ever expected. From presence to action to force. From silence to fragments of truth.
And now.
Only one thing remains. The moment after the car stopped. The moment where everything changed. The moment that has lived in the dark for nearly 50 years. And it's closer now than it has ever been. Not hidden. Not buried. Just waiting. For him to finally say it. Or for it to break through on its own. Some memories disappear because the mind forgets. Others disappear because the mind refuses to remember. And sitting inside that interview room, nearly 50 years after Eleanor Briggs vanished into the London night, he is no longer fighting the investigators. He is fighting himself. The silence after the last question feels different. Before, silence was his shield. A place where he could hide behind uncertainty. Now silence is a doorway. And everyone in the room knows what is on the other side. The investigators wait.
No interruption.
No pressure. Because they understand that the next words matter more than anything before them. Not because they will finally explain what happened. But because they will reveal whether he has been carrying the truth all these years. His eyes remain fixed downward. The room stays still. Then finally, I drove somewhere outside the city. The sentence comes quietly, almost like a confession he didn't intend to make. Outside London. Away from streets. Away from witnesses. Away from the last place anyone knew Eleanor was alive. The investigators exchange brief glances. Because every new detail closes another door. And opens another. Where outside the city. A pause. I don't remember the exact road. Another carefully measured answer. But this time, they don't let it end there. You remember enough to know it was outside London. He nods. Yes. And you remember why you went there? Silence. Longer. Then. I didn't want anyone to see. Those words change the atmosphere. Because they are not about memory. They are about intention. Not forgetting. Not confusion. Choice. The investigators let the sentence remain untouched. Because sometimes the most important evidence isn't hidden in what someone explains. It's hidden in what they accidentally reveal. You are worried someone would see Eleanor? He doesn't answer immediately. Then. Yes. The answer is small. But it carries enormous weight. Because fear of being seen means awareness. Awareness means understanding. And understanding means responsibility. The room grows quieter. The years between 1975 and now seem to disappear. Suddenly, it is no longer a historical file. No longer a faded photograph. It is a young woman walking through the cold London air. A car waiting. A door opening. And a moment that changed everything. The investigators return to the car. Because the vehicle has always been the missing piece. The place where science connected him to Eleanor. The place where the timeline becomes physical. You repaired the passenger side door shortly after she disappeared. He says nothing. You remember that? A slight movement. A nod. Yes. Why was it damaged? Another pause. Long. Careful. Then. I don't know. The answer is expected. But this time, it doesn't feel like a wall. It feels like avoidance. Because everyone knows. The repair record exists. The damage existed. The timing existed. And now they need the reason. You don't remember how your own car door was damaged? His jaw tightens. I said I don't know. The first sign of irritation. The first emotional reaction. And it matters. Because for hours, he has remained almost impossible to read. Now. Something has reached him. They shift again. Not harder. Smarter. You told us Eleanor fought back. He looks up. A brief glance. Yes. You told us she tried to leave. Another pause. Yes. You told us she was scared. This time, he doesn't answer. Because there is no safe answer. Agreeing confirms the victim. Denying contradicts everything he has already admitted. The silence itself becomes the response. Then the investigators ask the question that has been waiting. What happened to Eleanor Briggs after you stopped the car? The room freezes. No movement. No sound. Only the question. A question that has waited since 1975. He closes his eyes. For several seconds, nothing happens. Then his voice changes. Lower. Older. Almost exhausted. She was quiet. Those 3 words feel heavier than any confession. Because quiet can mean many things. But in this context, it means the struggle ended. The investigators continue carefully. Why was she quiet? No answer. Was she injured? His breathing changes. A small movement. A slight turn of the head.
Then.
Yes. The word arrives almost unnoticed. But once spoken, it cannot be recovered. The first direct acknowledgement. Something happened. Something serious. Something physical. What injuries? He doesn't answer. The silence returns. But now it is different. Because the truth has entered the room. It's no longer outside. No longer hypothetical. It is sitting there with them. You need to tell us what happened. His face remains expressionless. But the control is gone. Not completely. But enough. I lost control. The sentence is quiet. And dangerous. Because it explains nothing. But it admits everything. The investigators remain still. What does that mean? Another pause.
Then.
I got angry. The room feels colder. Because anger changes the nature of the story. This wasn't simply an accident. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't a moment without emotion. There was a reaction. A choice. A decision. What were you angry about? He shakes his head. I don't know. But this time, the answer sounds different. Not like uncertainty.
Like shame.
Or maybe fear. Fear of saying the words aloud. The investigators begin reconstructing the final sequence. The car. The road. The stop. The struggle. The silence afterward. And slowly another question appears. A question that has haunted Eleanor's family for decades. Where did he leave her? Because if he drove away, if he returned home, if he continued living, then somewhere outside London, a place exists. A place where the truth has been waiting. They ask. Where did you take her? He doesn't respond. Where was Eleanor? Still nothing. The silence stretches. Then finally, I buried her. The room stops. Completely. No one moves. No one speaks. Because after 50 years, the word they never had has finally arrived. Buried. Not missing. Not vanished. Not gone. Buried. The cold case suddenly changes shape. The mystery of a disappearance becomes the investigation of a death. And somewhere in the landscape outside London, a location exists. A place that has remained untouched. A place holding the answer everyone has searched for. The investigators know this is the moment. The moment where they must be careful. Because the location is everything. One wrong word. One wrong assumption. And the truth could disappear again. Where? The question is simple. But his answer doesn't come immediately. Because revealing the location means more than admitting what happened. It means returning to the place. Returning to the memory. Returning to the moment he has spent decades escaping. His hands tighten. His eyes close.
Then.
A whisper. A name of a place. A location. A forgotten stretch of land outside the city. A place no one ever thought to search. The investigators write it down. Then again. And again. Because after nearly half a century, they finally have what they never had. A direction. A destination. A path back to Eleanor Briggs. But as the team prepares to move, one question remains. Why there? Why that place? Why leave her there? Because the location may reveal more than where Eleanor was buried. It may reveal who he really was. And what happened that night in 1975. Because a grave does not just hold a victim. Sometimes it holds the secrets of the person who created it. For 49 years, Eleanor Briggs existed only as a question. A photograph. A name. A file number hidden inside a cabinet filled with thousands of forgotten stories. A woman who left a London shop one cold October night and never came home. For decades, her family lived inside uncertainty. Not knowing. Not understanding. Waiting for a phone call that never came. Waiting for a doorbell that never rang. Waiting for answers that seemed to disappear with every passing year.
But now,
a location has been given. A place outside the city. A place connected to the final moments of Eleanor's life. And suddenly, the impossible begins to feel real. The search is no longer through memories. It is through the ground. The investigation moves immediately.
Quietly. Carefully.
Because after nearly half a century, one mistake could destroy everything. The location provided is an isolated area on the outskirts of London. A forgotten piece of land. The kind of place people pass without noticing. Overgrown vegetation. Old trees. Unused paths. A landscape that changed with time, but not enough. Because beneath the surface, the past may still be waiting. The forensic team arrives before sunrise. The sky is gray.
The air heavy.
There are no cameras. No public announcement.
No dramatic moment.
Just officers standing silently in a place where no one has stood for decades with the same purpose. Finding Eleanor. The suspect is brought to the area under supervision. And for the first time, he sees the place again. The investigators watch closely. Not just where he points, but how he reacts. Because locations hold memories. And memories reveal things people try to hide. He steps out of the vehicle.
Slowly.
He looks around.
No visible panique. No breakdown.
Just silence. But investigators notice something. A pause. A moment where he seems disconnected from the present. As if part of him has already returned to 1975. This is the place, he says quietly.
No hesitation. No uncertainty.
After all these years, he knows. The search begins. The ground is examined carefully. Every movement recorded. Every piece of evidence preserved. Because this is no longer just a missing person investigation. This is the recovery of a life stolen decades earlier. And then, a discovery. Small at first. A disturbance beneath the surface. Something that doesn't belong. The team stops. The area expands. More careful examination. More waiting. Because after so many years, rushing could destroy the truth. The soil is removed layer by layer.
Slowly.
Methodically. And then, a piece of fabric.
Old.
Faded. But preserved. The atmosphere changes instantly. Because objects remember. Even when people forget. The search continues. More fragments appear. Evidence that confirms what Eleanor's family feared but never wanted to believe. She was here. The ground that held a secret for decades finally gives it back. The recovery becomes a turning point. Not because it solves everything, but because it gives Eleanor something she never had after that night. A return. A name beyond a missing poster. A place where her story can finally continue. The forensic examination begins. The remains are carefully analyzed. Every detail matters. Every fragment carries information. The investigators wait for confirmation. Although they already know. They know because of the location. Because of the confession. Because of the impossible chain of evidence that brought them here. But science must complete what suspicion started. Days pass. The results arrive. The identification is confirmed. Eleanor Briggs. The name that haunted London for decades. Finally has an answer. The news spreads. Not as a mystery anymore. As a revelation. A cold case solved. A forgotten disappearance reopened by forgotten evidence. The community reacts with shock. Because many people remember Eleanor. Not the details of the investigation. Not every headline. But her face. Her photograph. The young woman who vanished from an ordinary street. The woman whose absence became a permanent shadow over Camden. Now that shadow has a shape. And a reason. But solving the mystery of where Eleanor was creates a deeper question. Who was the man who took her? The suspect remains silent publicly. But investigators continue examining every piece of his life. Because one confession rarely tells the entire story. Especially after 50 years. They look back at the timeline. The years before Eleanor. The years after. And they find something disturbing. The end of Eleanor's case was not just an ending. It was a pattern break. Because after 1975, the disappearances stopped. No more similar cases. No more unexplained connections. No more women vanishing under similar circumstances. At first, investigators considered coincidence. Now, they consider something else. Maybe Eleanor was the final crime. Maybe something changed. Maybe something frightened him. Or maybe he believed he had finally made a mistake. The investigation expands again. Not toward the future. Toward the past. They revisit every unsolved disappearance connected to the original pattern. Every forgotten report. Every missing photograph. Every family that never received answers. Because one solved cold case can reopen many others. And now, Eleanor's name becomes the key. The investigators begin comparing details. Different cities. Different years. Different circumstances. But similar elements. Late hours. Quiet streets. Women traveling alone. A person watching from a distance. A vehicle nearby. The same patience. The same control. The same ability to disappear into normal life. The question becomes unavoidable. Was Eleanor the only victim? Or was she simply the one case that survived long enough to reveal him? Meanwhile, the suspect's life after 1975 comes under even greater examination. Neighbors from different decades are interviewed. Many say the same thing. He was quiet. Private. Never caused problems. The kind of person no one remembers clearly. And that is exactly what investigators find most disturbing. Because the most dangerous secrets are often hidden behind ordinary appearances. A person does not need to look dangerous to be dangerous. Sometimes the person everyone ignores is the person who knows exactly how to remain invisible. The evidence continues to build. The confession. The vehicle records. The forensic match. The location. The recovery. Every piece connecting back to one night in 1975. One decision. One victim. One cold case that refused to disappear. But even after the arrest, even after Eleanor is found, something remains unresolved. The full truth. Because a confession can reveal what happened,
but it cannot always explain why.
And investigators are still searching for that answer. What made this man choose Eleanor? Was she targeted? Was she followed? Was that night planned from the beginning? Or was it a moment that escalated beyond his control? Those questions remain. Because solving a cold case does not erase the darkness behind it. It only brings it into the light. And for Eleanor Briggs, the world finally knows what happened. But for the investigators who spent years chasing fragments through forgotten files, the case is not just about catching someone. It is about understanding how someone could live for nearly 50 years, carrying a secret beneath ordinary days, walking through streets, buying groceries, speaking to neighbors, living a normal life, while somewhere beneath the surface, a hidden truth waited. A truth buried not only in the ground, but inside the mind of the man who put it there. And now that truth has been uncovered. But one final question remains. After everything he admitted, after everything investigators discovered, after all the years of silence, will he finally reveal every secret he has kept? Or will some parts of the darkness remain buried forever? For nearly 50 years, the truth waited in silence. Not because it was gone. Not because it was impossible to find. But because it was buried beneath time. Beneath forgotten evidence. Beneath assumptions. Beneath the belief that some mysteries are destined to remain unanswered. The disappearance of Eleanor Briggs was once one of those mysteries. A case that became a symbol of uncertainty. A photograph on a wall. A name repeated by detectives who had run out of leads. A family forced to live between hope and grief.
But now,
the silence has been broken. Eleanor has been found. The man connected to her disappearance has been identified. And the city that spent decades wondering what happened finally has an answer. But answers do not always bring peace. Sometimes, they bring a different kind of pain. Because knowing the truth means facing everything that was hidden. Everything that was lost. Everything that can never be repaired. The arrest sends shockwaves through London. People who lived near Camden in 1975 struggle to process the revelation. The man they now see in the news reports
was not a stranger from the outside.
He was someone who existed among them. Someone who walked the same streets, entered the same shops, passed the same people. A person who blended into everyday life so completely that no one looked twice. And that becomes the most disturbing part of the entire case. Not that he disappeared into the darkness, but that he disappeared into normality. Neighbors remember him differently now. Some say they noticed things that seemed unusual. Small moments. Small behaviors. Things that seemed meaningless at the time. A strange silence. A distant expression. A habit of watching people without interacting. But memories are complicated. Especially after decades. Because once the truth is known, the past begins to change. People search through their memories looking for warning signs. Looking for something they missed. Something that could have changed everything. But the reality is harder. Sometimes there are no obvious signs. Sometimes danger does not announce itself. Sometimes it lives quietly behind ordinary routines. The investigators continue their work even after the discovery. Because a cold case does not end the moment someone is arrested. It changes. The focus shifts from finding out what happened to understanding why. And that question remains. Why Eleanor? Why that night? Why did a man with no obvious connection choose to follow her? The suspect provides some answers during later interviews. But not all. Pieces come out slowly. Fragments of memory. Explanations that raise more questions than they solve. He describes himself as someone who felt invisible. Someone who spent years feeling disconnected from the world around him. But investigators are careful. Because explanations are not excuses. Understanding a person's mindset does not erase the choices they made. It does not bring back what was taken. It does not change the suffering left behind. The evidence tells its own story. A story built from facts. The receipt. The fingerprint. The vehicle records. The repair documents. The confession. The location. Each piece alone was incomplete. But together, they created a picture that could no longer be ignored. A cold case solved not by one dramatic discovery, but by decades of forgotten details finally meeting modern technology. And that may be the greatest lesson of Eleanor Briggs' case. That evidence does not disappear. Sometimes it waits. A piece of paper. A forgotten record. A mark left behind. A detail considered meaningless by one generation. And crucial by another. The investigation also leaves behind another haunting question. How many other cases remain buried because the right evidence has not yet been found? Across cities and countries, thousands of families continue waiting. Waiting for a phone call. Waiting for a discovery. Waiting for someone to reopen a file that has been closed for years. Because every cold case represents more than a mystery. It represents a person. A life. A family forced to continue without answers. Eleanor Briggs was not just a headline. Not just a case number. She was a daughter. A friend. A person who had plans for the future. A person whose ordinary walk home became the final moment of a life interrupted. And after decades of uncertainty, her story finally has an ending. Not the ending anyone wanted, but the ending her family deserved. The trial that follows becomes another chapter in the story. A courtroom filled with evidence collected across generations. Photographs from 1975. Documents from forgotten archives. Testimony from investigators who refused to let the case disappear. The prosecution presents the timeline. The final hours. The connection. The evidence. The confession. The defense attempts to challenge pieces of the investigation. Questioning memories. Questioning interpretations. But the weight of the evidence remains. Because this case was not solved by one person's recollection. It was solved by everything together. A half-century of silence finally confronted by facts. And when the verdict arrives, it closes one chapter. But it does not erase the years before. It does not erase the nights Eleanor's family wondered. It does not erase the empty chair. The unanswered questions. The pain of not knowing. Justice can acknowledge what happened. But it cannot return what was lost. And perhaps that is the hardest truth about cold cases. Solving them does not bring back the past. It only gives the past a voice. For decades, Eleanor Briggs had no voice. Her disappearance became a mystery. Her final moments became speculation. Her name existed between hope and tragedy. Now, the truth finally speaks for her. And the city remembers. Not the fear. Not only the crime. But the person. The young woman whose story survived because people refused to stop searching. The investigators who reopened forgotten files. The scientists who discovered what older methods could not. The family who kept asking questions when the world moved on. Because every cold case carries the same message. Time can hide the truth. But time does not destroy it. Somewhere, evidence remains. Somewhere, a detail waits. Somewhere, a forgotten piece of the story is still sitting in the dark, waiting for someone to find it. And in the case of Eleanor Briggs, that forgotten piece finally appeared. A small clue. A quiet discovery. A connection across decades. Enough to bring the truth back into the light. London moved forward after 1975. Buildings changed. Streets changed. Generations changed. But one night remained frozen. A night when a young woman disappeared. A night when a family lost someone they loved. A night that became one of London's most haunting cold cases. Until nearly 50 years later, the silence ended. The evidence spoke. And Eleanor Briggs was finally found. Her story is no longer one of disappearance. It is a story of remembrance. A reminder that behind every cold case is a human life. And behind every unanswered question, there may still be an answer waiting. Hidden. Forgotten. But never truly gone.